All right, Josh Smith here at my studio, live from Flat 5. My guest today is a great guitar player, singer, writer, artist. I've known him for a while, even though we don't actually ever cross paths. We talk about it quite often, but it, it never really happens. That's the way it is in this world a lot of the times. You may have seen him play with Greg Allman, but he's also got many great solo albums. He's toured with a lot of people, some friends of ours. We've actually done the same gigs before. But man, he's a great guitar player. He also teaches on True Fire, and he's in New York right now. I want to thank him for his time. Everybody, welcome Scott Sharrard.
Hey man, thanks for having me today. I love the program, man. It's good to see you staying busy.
Well, that's what it's all about these days, right? Staying busy so that you stay sane. It's half the reason I'm doing all this stuff is just to keep myself busy. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, you got that beautiful studio too, so it's good you're putting it to use in as many ways as you can. It's a good time to have that, you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's funny. Nobody wants to come over, so I'm just like I'm just here by myself all the time. Yeah.
But you need some of those $5 COVID tests, man.
Exactly. Yeah, man. Where do you get those $5 COVID tests? I'd like to have them by the door. The
I keep
instant.
reading about them, but I know there's like the Joe Rogan podcast. They test everybody who comes in. I'm sure theirs aren't $5, but
Probably not.
you basically go in and I guess I don't know what they have like a candy bowl and you take a nose swab and you wait 15 minutes and then you go in and life goes
Yeah.
on as normal.
I'm sure they're on Craigslist. I'm sure I can find them. Oh man. Well, dude, for the people not familiar with your story, I know you were born in Michigan and you spent your formative years in Milwaukee. I know you played the Up and Under pub, which is where I played as a kid the first time I went to Milwaukee.
Oh my
But tell
God, I didn't
everybody.
know you played there, man.
Oh yeah,
That's
yeah.
amazing.
I was
Oh, that's
probably,
amazing.
I think I was probably 15 or 16 the first time I played at the Up and Under pub. And there was
That's when I
another
was. I
place.
mean, we're
What was the other place?
yeah, we're about
Sandy's
well, the
Pastime. Sandy's.
Shank Hall.
Was there Sandy's National Pastime? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember it. There was all the other sort of joints, like the place I used to play in every week with Stokes was Mamie's. If you remember, that
Okay.
was like out in the out in the suburbs of Milwaukee. But the Up and Under, my band ended up playing there, and I think we're probably about the same age. I think so.
I'm
It's
41. I
funny
just
because I
turned
was
41.
yeah, so I'm 2 years older than you, but when I was 15, I was playing in the Up and Under all the time, and then by my later teens, I was playing there every Thursday with my band.
Yeah. Well, so then let's rewind there. I'm always curious, and everybody says, well, everybody asks the same questions, but whatever, it's important. How the guitar ends up in your hands. It's like for me, my family were not musicians. It was just complete happenstance that my dad bought me a guitar. I guess he wanted a musician, in the family. How did it end up for you? What's a musical family or no musical family?
Yeah, I mean, it would be an understatement to call my family a musical family in terms of like it was just records all the time. My dad's a guitar player, singer, songwriter. He grew up, playing in bands in Detroit in the 60s. So it was like, Beatles outfits and Beatles guitars playing nothing but like R&B and soul music with the amps on 10. So that was how he started. But then he saw Bob Dylan play at Michigan State University and he saw him. The story he tells is that Dylan went on and halfway through the set, he said, I'm going to play you guys a song I just wrote. It's called Blown in the Wind. And I guess at the end of that concert, the story goes with my dad that he sold his vintage, what would now be a vintage SG and Super Reverb, and got a couple Guild acoustics and a Martin 0018, which I have now. It was a 61, and he went fully acoustic. So he was playing, my dad, he had offers to be managed, and he was out in LA trying to get a record deal in the 60s and 70s, and it just didn't pan out for him. So he ended up having to work a bunch of odd jobs and move around. But growing up, especially in my earlier years in Michigan, he would just be playing in the living room, playing acoustic guitar, playing all kinds of great music. Everything from Bob Dylan, Jesse Colin Young, John Hammond Jr. type stuff, and then into the older blues stuff like Lead Belly and Lightning Hopkins and a lot of Jimmy Reed and Chuck Berry, and that's what really hooked me. And basically one day I grabbed one of those acoustics and he just taught me, the Jimmy Reed. He just taught me that. And then over the course of weeks, I learned all 3 versions of that so I could play a 12-bar blues.
Yeah.
And I think there was one day where he busted out and started playing a solo, and I realized I played behind him. I said, I remember that moment. I was about 10, and I said, this is the greatest feeling on earth when I'm playing rhythm guitar and somebody's expressing themselves and we're making music. And for me, that was like the big bang, the 12-bar blues right away.
Oh yeah, those little moments when it becomes not just only that you get something under your fingers and it's like, oh my God, I got this. Like it's really that feeling. But the first time you actually even play with anyone else besides yourself and do something at the same time that works is like just mind blowing. It's like you'll never go back after that. It's, there's before and after that moment.
That Jimmy Reed thing too. I mean, I've had, as I told you, as we were getting set up here, I've been teaching a lot this year because of all the gigs being gone. So I've been working like 20 hours a week, and it's amazing to watch. Sometimes I'll get these players who can just play the most incredible stuff, some stuff that I can't even play, and they don't even know that Jimmy Reed rhythm pattern. They've never even investigated the first position of the guitar. It's crazy, but that's one of life's greatest joys, is learning those kind of things, because it just shows you the beauty and simplicity. You've got to have both, sort of. It's a yin and yang thing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, okay, so another question I'm always curious about in the initial upbringing and the learning. So you had your dad that lit your spark, and you had guitars around the house. Did you have any music at school?
Well, yeah, when I got to high school, I did. So I got into, when my family moved to Milwaukee, I got into High School of the Arts right away, and that was pretty much like the greatest thing you could imagine as a teenager playing music. I mean, I was hanging out, meeting girls in the art department, and then I was spending 6 hours a day playing in the jazz room with all these incredible musicians who are all now professional musicians and still friends of mine, lifelong friends. One of them being my friend Sean Hinton, who's been with Mary J. Blige for like 20 years now. But Sean was like a mentor to me. He was a year younger than me, but he was a mentor to me. He taught me all about all the guitar drive Baptist church stuff. Spanky was Spanky Chalmers Alford was his uncle, and so I learned all the Spanky stuff from Sean. So I had that, but then the guest professors at the school, the guys who would come in and teach during the week on off days and stuff, were Gerald Cannon, who played bass with Elvin Jones Jazz Machine. So I met Gerald, and Gerald would take me down to Chicago to Joe Siegel's, and he would set me up on stage behind Elvin Jones, and they'd play a gig, and I'd have Elvin like sweating on me when I was like 15, all thanks to Gerald teaching at my school. And then Mel Ryan, West Montgomery's organist.
Wow.
So, and I ended up doing a lot of pickup gigs with Mel around town, because Mel used to like to play blues piano too, not just organ. Most people obviously know him from playing organ on the West Montgomery stuff, which...
Yeah.
But anyway, so those guys were teaching at my school, and then the Up and Under was like a salon. The jam session was crazy. Hubert Someone hung out there all the time, and Luther Allison would come hang when he was off the road. And I got to play with a bunch of guys from that scene. Like I used to play with Big Eye Willie Smith at Coco's Jam Session, who I met through them. And there was an incredible scene in Milwaukee, but the school was great.
Well, Milwaukee is so close enough in proximity to Chicago that you had a lot of guys who would live in Milwaukee and drive to Chicago or vice versa, and there was a lot of crossover there. But the school thing is interesting to me because it mirrors my path, I guess, a little bit. I had been playing again since I was 6, 7, doing my own thing, kind of learning what I could, and then I took some lessons. But then when I got to high school, to be around a bunch of other people my age I went to a performing arts school like you, and it was like, wow, that was a big kick in the pants, because I'd never been around people my age who were even into it at all, and they weren't into the music I was into, and there wasn't actually a lot of jazz in my school. It was like was weird. It was a magnet school. It had like a pop music program, a rock band, classical stuff, but there wasn't really a jazz program in this school, which was weird. But even just being around music every day and having music classes or having to even carry my guitar to school, I think was a big part of just even further ingraining in me. This is what I'm doing. This is like it's it, you know.
Well, yeah, and I was joking about, going and hanging out in the art department to meet girls, but it's like before that, I was a completely awkward, totally ostracized kid at every school I was at, where
Yeah.
the quarterback was the dude, and I was
Oh
terrible
yeah.
at sports, and nobody understood why I was playing this music or listening to this music. And then I got there, and it was like overnight, I found my people. It was crazy.
Oh, dude, in middle school, I was the only kid with long hair. In high school, half the kids, half the dudes had long hair.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there
Well,
was
the cool
absolutely.
thing about Milwaukee High School of the Arts, MHSA, too, was, it was an inner city program. So, it was really 75% minority. And for me, being like a middle class white kid, and I lived on the east side of Milwaukee, which was kind of like, I guess now it would be like it's where the Whole Foods is. Back then, we
Okay.
had like whatever the mom and pop version of that was.
Right.
But, I was kind of, I was living in a nicer part of town. And it was like, getting to really just forge these lifelong friendships with people who were my neighbors and also who I probably never would have met in my life if it hadn't been for this school. It
Yep.
gave me the most incredible education, man. I will be forever grateful for that school.
That's funny, man. That's very. We have a lot in common in those regards. So my high school was also in the middle of downtown Fort Lauderdale, inner city. It was like 90%, black high school, and that was why they made it a magnet school to try to get other people into that school. But most of the friends who have stuck with me from that school for lifelong friends were friends not actually from the arts program, but friends who were just at that school anyways, who I made, which has been interesting actually. A lot like you, a lot of my friends are still professional musicians from that school, but there was a lot of dancers in my school, arts, acting, all that stuff, and a lot of them have gone on to do cool stuff, which is cool. But whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really important, and now it's like we're in this time where it's like, you and I were obviously, I think we may have even been beneficiaries of the same federal money,
Most likely.
because I know that, and the program in Milwaukee was underwritten by Mike Cudahy, who was a multimillionaire, and Cudahy was a huge jazz fan, and he poured a ton of money into the school. And I think, now, especially we're seeing, I mean, the whole reason that, I saw a documentary on the invention of hip hop and, and it's controversial where it started, but it certainly could have been the Bronx or Queens. And I saw a lot of the inventors of the music in the documentary talking about how the music programs were so decimated by the fact that the city and the federal budgets, especially the federal budgets cut by Ronald Reagan, just decimated their music program, that they basically just ended up back at the house with the turntable. And that's kind of how the turntable turned into an instrument, necessity being the mother of invention. And
Yeah.
and it's just that music program, I can't tell you how important it was for all of us, no matter if we could
Yeah.
afford a guitar or not, just to be able to go to school. And there were all these, Fender tube amplifiers and keyboards and drum sets, and we'd have 2 hours a day where we could do whatever we want. We'd go in there and we'd work on, memorizing like shit off the Grant Green Alive record, or Maceo Parker
Nice.
Live on Planet Groove was popular with all of us, and like the Parliament Funkadelic shit. We spent a lot of time just getting away with murder, because the rest of the time we had to learn like the Jamie Aebersold program. We were
Yeah,
learning
of
all the
course.
bebop stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. All the same charts that were going around every school in the whole country.
exactly.
Yeah.
Jamie was a big fan of our band in the school. Actually, he used to come through town and he gave us a bunch of these little words that he would make and stuff.
That's cool, man. I remember going into my band director's room and he was like, let's find a new chart to play this week. And I opened his filing cabinet and it was like charts just covered in dust. And it was, on Green Dolphin Street and whatever, but they were just so old. It was unbelievable. Yeah. But it was every school I've been to has the same stash of charts. Yeah.
Well,
Man.
the main professor there, Cliff Gribble, who's now retired, he and I were always having a war because I was so cocky because I was so obsessed with blues and soul and rock and roll music, and the jazz that I loved was like the organ combo jazz and
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
I was always, I was into getting, playing melodies and getting people moving and stuff. And Cliff, bless his heart, I mean, he was all about like some really, really deep shit. I mean, he was really into like, Benny Carter and Gil Evans and stuff.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't getting through to the kids, and it certainly wasn't getting through to me. And I do have some regrets about not studying more when I was there. I was definitely a little bit of a pain in his ass. But the thing was, is I had a good enough feel that I could get away with being in the top band, so I kind of cheated my way through it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you were already gigging at that time, so you had, a little bit of experience being around adults and playing, and yeah, you started to get your feel together. And it was the same. I was working already, playing gigs every weekend, and so it was like at school I felt like I didn't want to be told how to play. I was starting to try to find my own voice, I guess, already, which sounds ridiculous looking back on it. But yeah, I always felt like I should have maybe taken a little bit more seriously some of the deeper lessons they were trying to teach, But I was just always waiting for that moment when they finally bring out the squib cakes chart for big band.
Yeah, that's the shit, man.
Yeah,
Well, I picked it up when I got to New York. You remember Vic Juris?
Yeah, absolutely.
I had a friend who told me I should go see him, and I hadn't even learned to read music in high school, if you could believe that.
Wow.
Everyone would just half the band were all ear players. So what we do is half the band could read, and the half of the band that could read, they couldn't improvise as well as we could. So they teach us everything in the off hours. We'd learn by ear. But then when I got with Vic, I sat down with Vic, and he was so incredible, man. I was about 20 when I moved to New York, and I sat down with him and took a lesson with him at the new school. And, he's like, oh, let's play this. We played, a tune with changes, and he's like, man, that's not happening. And he goes, let's play a blues. And then we played a blues, and we got to the end of the blues, and he goes, all right, look. He's like, just get these 2 books. And he scribbled down these 2 William Levitt books for me. And this Charlie Christian book, and he just goes, just learn all this, you're going to be fine. Don't come back.
Oh, man. All right, so you ended up in New York, but what was the thought process when you finished high school? What were your parents kind of leaning on you to do? What were you thinking? I mean, obviously, you probably decided right away this is what you're doing. You're already doing it, basically. Was college a thing? Do your parents want you to go to college? I'm always curious about that. Like, my parents were cool with whatever. My grandparents were not, but they got over it. I'm curious how it worked for you.
My life was kind of like, it's not to get too down a Freudian rabbit hole here, but I think that, once my parents realized that I was going to be able to do it, that just became their obsession. Like, because my dad was never able to get over the hump and have a career. So,
Sure.
My teen years, I was kind of like a little blues Glenn Gould or something. They would, just take me everywhere.
Yeah.
But I didn't really ever go for it. And I think what stopped me was I met a kid when I was about 13 or 14, who just got me into like the beatniks, and it started with like Kerouac, Ginsberg, Burroughs, and then I just kept going and going and going. And then I got into like Tom Waits and got really heavily into like Leonard Cohen and Bob Dylan. And I started to draw this connection between my favorite bands, who ironically were the Allman Brothers and Little Feat, who are going to see in the summers. And now, I don't know if you knew this, but like since last November when Paul passed away, I'm now a member of Little Feat as well.
I do know that, yeah.
And when I saw a picture of Lil George and I heard Waiting for Columbus, I said, this is what I want to do with my life. And to me, the defining principle to all of it was, this was just my journey, was I felt like, well, if I can't ever be in a band where there's a great singer and great songs, there's no point in playing the guitar well. And I started that when I was like 12, 13 years old. I got this thing in my head that I've got to figure out you know, the unifying element. So at first I didn't really sing. And then like a lot of people, I get to the point where I realize I either don't want to deal with a singer, or, you know, if I don't start singing, nothing's going to happen. And then I started doing that first, and then playing covers and playing blues. And, you know, my band, the Chesterfield Kings in Milwaukee, who had that every Thursday gig, we played nothing but the records I would find when I would like go to New Orleans or Chicago. So we would play shit off. We played all the Meters shit. We played, you know, Grant Green shit, Bobby Womack, Tyrone Davis, Little Milton. We learned all this stuff, and it was like packed with college kids, and they thought we wrote all these songs. This is so far before the internet, right? So it started with that, and I eventually, once I got to New York, I really started to push myself as a singer and a songwriter even farther. But for me, I always had that sort of diamond in my mind of like, okay, I'm working on all this shit. I'm going to learn this solo note for note. I'm going to get a good sound. But like, if I don't have a vision for what it's got to be, I can't make it. And I never really leaned into the virtuoso thing as a result of that. I just never, I had a self-consciousness about it. Because there, honestly, even in Milwaukee in the 90s, there were so many kids who could play exactly like Stevie Ray Vaughan that I got to the point where I was just like, am I going to do that? Or am I going to try to write some songs and try to do something? And honestly, it was a much harder path, because there was a time when there were managers coming to my gigs, and, you know, I was being offered deals and stuff, and I was literally just not going with it. I was just being a jerk about it, probably just to rebel against what I was being fostered to be. And I've had as many moments in the business of cutting myself off at the knees as I have making strides. But I wasn't good enough for me. That was the thing. I couldn't. For me, it was like, if I'm going to play a show, I got to have a song, and I got to sing, and I got to have that. And until I have that, I'm not going to take it to the next level. You know,
Right.
It's probably a stupid move, but
Well, no, but I mean, at least you kind of knew yourself, and you knew where you wanted to end up. Maybe you didn't know how you were going to get there, but you were at least on the path, you know, which is always interesting, like when you find which way you're supposed to go. So what made you go to New York then? What was the impetus behind that?
a cheap apartment. So I was in Milwaukee, you know, living in a house with 4 other musicians that was, you know, like a 6-bedroom house where I was paying like $200 a month, you know.
Sure, yeah.
And I was playing, you know, 15, 20, $200, $300 gigs a month. I mean, I had my car paid off. I was living the life. But, you know, I had my friend Sean Dixon, who I went on to form this band, the Chesterfields, with, which was the outgrowth of the band that we had in Milwaukee. He found this. He had found this friend in New York, and we were both in Milwaukee at the time. And we together found this rent-controlled place on 13th Street and First Avenue in the East Village. And I had my bags packed to go to New Orleans. I had another friend who'd moved there, and I'd been going there regularly since I was 16. But you know, just happened to find this place, and I said, you know what, fuck it. If I can live in the East Village, let's go check it out. And that was the summer of '96. So I was 19 or 20, however, whatever the math is there. It's all a blur these days. You know, ultimately moved into a 5-floor walk-up in a cold water flat that was $1,500 a month. It was a giant 3-bedroom, which even at the time was almost unheard of.
Yeah, that's amazing.
You know, and I got there, and I found out that Allen Ginsberg lived across the street, and you know, it started, you know, started going to Bleecker Street, sitting in at Terra Blues, and there's Ahmet Ertegun is sitting in the fucking booth smoking a cigarette. I got to know him. He was like a mentor. We had Bill Sims and Michael Powers and all these great local blues guys back then. You know, you could smoke in a bar. There were, you know, I started working pretty quick. It was a very different New York.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, did you ever play Manny's Car Wash? I mean, I remember coming up and playing Terror Blues, but
times.
also Manny's, yeah. What was the guy's name that
many times.
Manny's Car Wash?
You know, I never booked the gig. I only worked there as a sideman. But I did see that guy all the time at the bar. I used to play there with like
it'll come to me in a second.
2 different people.
Yeah, he had gray hair. He kind of looked like Tom Dowd. Buddy Fox.
That's it. That's it. Buddy Fox. He was a total character, total New York character.
I remember coming to play Manny's Car Wash. I think it was my first gig under my own name in New York. I was probably 16, and we got there the night before, and we sprung for hotels in the city, which was a giant splurge on the tour, like to stay in the
I'll
city.
bet.
And the night before my gig, we saw Hiram Bullock with Will Lee and Anton,
Yep.
and it was like, yeah, that was cool. I'm happy to be playing here. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I'll never.
that was the spot. That and Dan Lynch Bar, which was around the corner from the apartment I moved into. But the irony was, the week I moved into the apartment, the summer of '96, was the week that Dan Lynch Bar closed.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh man, yeah. But there were places. Yeah, I mean, like the rest of the country, there were just much more places to play back then. I mean, my first tour was in between my sophomore and junior year, I think. We toured all around. That's when I played Up and Under. It's like we toured all around the country in a van. We just drove around with my dad. Like there was so many places to play. I think every weeknight was full. I don't think he could do that now. I mean, well, you can't do it at all right now, but the last 10 years, I don't think anybody's doing that in the States.
I mean, I did a van tour with my solo band about 2 years ago, and I'm going to have PTSD from that year for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think I'm going to be doing that anymore. I used to
Yeah.
do it in my mid 20s with some different acts, and I'll never. We did 150 shows with my trio, and they're my best friends, and we have this incredible tour manager. But I'll never do it again. I can't do it. It's just once you get to a certain age, it's not worth it.
There's part of that, and there's part that's just it's not actually worth it at all. Anyways, it's all for this. It's all for your heart and soul. It's like dude, that's one thing the pandemic has shown me that I didn't quite realize is, man, almost none of my income comes from playing gigs. And it's like I would have if you sat me down and asked me that question, I would have thought there's no way. Like most of my money comes from gigs. Not the case at all.
Well, I'm with you, man. I mean, like I've been really lucky in the Northeast because, where we live in Harlem in New York City. I'm at my mother-in-law's house in Woodstock here. We've been coming up on the weekends just to get out. But, the Northeast is amazing. And, I spent almost a decade playing with Greg Allman, and the East Coast was his breadbasket from Florida up to Maine. And it's the exact same for Little Feat. I mean, this touring circuit is insane. And the beautiful thing about New York is I can play the tri-state area all year. I can play 60, 70 gigs all year, every year in this area, and they all make good money. And what I do is I just switch up. What I'll do is I'll do a certain number of those shows will be Scott Sharrard band shows. Some of them will be solo acoustic. And then some of them will be these multi-artist guest shows we do, which is where we go to bigger rooms like the Brooklyn Bowl or the Cap, which was what we were going to do this year. But that's by having all those different like musical themes, repertoire, arranging, and then rooms, I can actually make it work here without having to go anywhere. And I've been doing it for the last year and a half. And it's like, honestly, it's the most money I've ever made playing music live. Doing that circuit
cool.
Until, of course, the shutdown,
Well, it is a nice thing about the East Coast is the distances between cities is a little more manageable, and they don't cross over very much. A lot like being in Europe, and you could play a gig one night and only drive 100 miles or less, and it's totally different audiences, no overlap. And that's a nice thing about the East Coast for sure.
Yeah, that's like last year we did a Fillmore East. Allman Brothers Fillmore East album celebration with J-Mo from the Allman Brothers on drums, and we put together a great band. We did a sold-out show at Brooklyn Bowl, and then the next day we drove, like you said, 100 miles to Philly, and we did another sold-out show at the Ardmore. And It's like we had an offer for a third one in Connecticut, but we weren't all available. But the point is like all those things are within a couple hours of each other, and It's like a fresh set of 400 or 500 people. It's crazy.
Yep. All right, so you moved to New York, and you've got your band, your Milwaukee guys, and you've been playing covers, all these soul covers. When do you start doing your own tunes?
almost as soon as I got to New York, I started writing in earnest. And Sean Dixon and I met up with this bass player, Anthony Eagle, and we formed a trio. And we shortened it from Chesterfield Kings to the Chesterfields because there was already a punk rock band from Canada called the Chesterfield Kings, we found out. Because we got to New York, our first gig was at old Kenny's Castaways. I don't know if you knew that place.
I've never been there, but I've heard of it, yeah.
It's pretty legendary, and Kenny would get pretty sauced, but he'd hang out at the end of the bar. Kenny was like the road manager for Humble Pie, and he's like an old UK rock dude. And I went and sat in at a jam one night, and he was, fucking 100 sheets to the wind. He came to me, he's like, I want you to come play with your band. So we came and played, and we called the Chesterfield Kings, and these, two guys showed up. And it turned out that they were fans of this punk band from Canada, and they wanted to beat the shit out of us. So then we changed. It's funny, I don't tell that story often enough. But anyway, we changed it to the Chesterfields, and we made a demo. And for that demo, I made a goal for myself to write 3 or 4 tunes, and I did. And this is, I'm really going to age myself now, but we made a cassette tape.
Of course, yeah.
Sold the cassette tape of this. This is right when it was on that cusp. And then a couple months later, we actually went in the studio, recut a couple. I had written a couple more songs, then we made our first CD. And so right away, pretty much, in terms of getting to New York, because the whole goal was, I'm going to get the hell out of, because in Milwaukee, I could have just stayed there and been, the sort of Midwest dude for the rest of my life. I mean, I was set up for it. And literally, man, I ended up becoming an office temp within the first year in New York, and I worked odd jobs in New York City for 5 years in temping. I ended up with a job at the Carlisle Hotel in the purchasing department from the age of 21 to 23 or 4, I guess. And the guy I was working for retired, and they wanted to make me the purchasing director. It was going to be a big job. And I said, if I take this fucking job, my career is over. Can't do this.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. I turned it down. They told me I was insane. But then I started going on the road. So it all worked out.
So what was the first road work you were doing? Was it your own stuff or was it side band stuff?
Yeah, it was the Chesterfields. I mean, the plan was for that. That band had a really good, I guess they used to call it a development deal, but really it was a bunch of random Wall Street dudes who loved our band, who saw us play at Terra Blues and Manny's Car Wash. And this is in the late 90s when people were just burning money, pretty much.
Sure.
So we had this huge budget. We went to Dangerous Studios. We were making a record there at the same time as Rob Thomas. Rob Thomas became a huge fan of the band. We ended up doing a bunch of touring, but nothing really ever came of the band. I mean, the local gigs we did in New York, we were like an 8-piece band. I mean, we were very, very young and very idealistic.
Right.
You remember, do you know Josh Dion?
I know who he is. I don't know him personally, but yeah, I know who he is.
I'd love to hear you guys play together, man. I mean, you guys would make incredible music, but Josh is one of my favorite musicians, but if you know his, people know his stuff now, but we're all in the same age group. And he had a band. We both had bands at the Up and Under that had sort of dueling residencies, and we were big fans of each other's bands. And we both had these huge, fucking, totally ridiculous, unaffordable bands.
Yeah,
unsustainable,
completely unrealistic. Yeah, but fun. Yeah.
Oh, they were really, really, really good bands. I mean, and of course, these musicians every one of these musicians in his and my band have all gone on to have great careers. But, we were all very young and idealistic, and the Chesterfields thing was very much in that. But we made a record called Henry Street Soul, which came out on this independent label that ultimately tanked. And it's available everywhere online, the Chesterfields Henry Street Soul. But, man, I'm super proud of that record. And I was 22, 23.
Right.
I'm singing on it, playing guitar. I wrote all the songs. Some of them with Sean, some of them by myself. So that was my first record. And we did it, 48-track, 2-inch tape, Neve desk, the whole fucking thing.
Oh, dude, that feeling is the best. I remember making my first real record. I made a few in Florida, first one was on ADATs. I remember that for sure, which, man, is the worst sounding record I've ever heard, maybe ever. But I was 13 at the time, but the first time I got to go to Ardent in Memphis and work on a real record, like with Jim Gaines as a producer, and yeah, Neve Desk and Studers, and it was like, okay, this is, I get it now. Like, this is, I'm supposed to be here. This is where I want to be, at least. You know, that's such a great feeling.
Yeah, Arden is like a temple, man. I mean, shit.
Yeah.
I mean, ZZ Top, Stevie Ray, In Step. You know, I mean, that's a great fucking studio.
Dude, it's a great studio, and Jim, I was so excited because he had done In Step and all that, and Santana, and even, I mean, even as an engineer, he had done a ton of records I'd listened to back when he was in San Francisco. But yeah, man, that's a great feeling. So okay, so then what's the next like progression? When does that band wind down, and you kind of start, you know, doing more whatever the gigs that come in, you know, because I know that same process, like where when you kind of stop doing your own thing a little bit, and you start taking this gig and this gig and this gig, and next thing you know, a few years goes by, and you've fallen into like this new thing, you know.
Yeah, well, I definitely my 20s were kind of a lot of very tough lessons, you know. And you know, I mentioned in passing meeting Ahmet Ertegun at Terra Blues. I mean, I went up to his office at Atlantic a couple times, and he was so supportive of me, and he tried to get me signed. He tried to get Tommy LaPuma to do a record on me. Then Russ Titleman tried to do a record on me, but we could never get enough financing to do what everybody envisioned. Every producer who would find me, they had a different vision for me, and it was unfortunately something that would have been done in LA in the 70s. It wasn't something that was practical anymore. So now we're in the early 2000s. And Sean Dixon and I were basically the Chesterfields. It was basically the two of us. We were the songwriters, arrangers,
Right.
band leaders. And I decided it was going to be a lot easier. I was hearing music in my head that Sean wasn't hearing. And I've also always played bass and drums. I've always had a drum set and a bass. And I decided I wanted to make a record with Charlie Martinez, who I'm still working with. In fact, he's working for Little Feat now, too. You know, Charlie's just a couple years older than me, but an absolutely brilliant engineer and producer. And Charlie's worked with, you know, everyone from Don Was and Keith Richards to, he was with Steely Dan for a long time. He still works for Donald Fagen. So he's been doing all that stuff simultaneously to whatever I've been doing. And the point of that is that Charlie had all this incredible recording gear, and we put it above a garage in Cold Spring, New York, just up the Hudson River. And what I was doing was I was literally doing sideman gigs where I was doing fly dates with people, and you know, whatever pickup session work was left, and like fucking playing weddings. And
Yeah.
you know, then I would go on any off days that Charlie or I had. We would go up to Cold Spring. We'd take the train up, or ride in his car up there, and then I'd spend, you know, a few days playing drums and bass and guitar and writing and playing. And I made my first 2 solo albums in that studio. So that was Dawnbreaker and Analog Monologue. And Dawnbreaker, the first one, I got my good buddy and one of my favorite musicians of all time, Charlie Drayton, played drums on a couple tunes. And I even got Sean Dixon I had come and play with Charlie because we all like playing together a lot. And Sean also plays bass, so they're both multi-instrumentalists. But most of that record, I played everything on it. And then Analog Monologue, I played everything on it, and I didn't like how the drum sounds were going, and I gave it to Sean Pelton. He played drums on that. So that was like my 20s was spent basically working on those records, to be honest with you. It was those, and then Ante Up was the last one. That was right when I had joined Greg Allman. So that was like 2007 or 8 we recorded that record. And for that record, I had a band, and we actually went to Cleveland and did it in a real studio. But, you know, my 20s, man, were just lost. I mean, I was just fucking going from one dead-end concept to another.
Yep.
Playing fucking wedding gigs. They were the best wedding bands in New York, so everyone in the band was like, there's one band, like half the band was Rod Stewart's band. You know, they're all incredible musicians.
Yeah.
And, you know, we were making good money for playing. But literally, bro, I was like getting in a tux. And at the time, my wife was switching careers from photography to pastry, and she had to go through pastry school. So I always say that weddings, you know, got my wife a great pastry degree. And it paid for my little self-indulgent soul albums. But, you know, it wasn't really until when I was 30, when I hooked up with Greg, that things started to, that
Yeah.
whole trajectory started to change.
And how old were you when you got married?
Oh, it was right before Greg, so I guess I was 29.
Okay, okay, so more towards the end of the 20s. Because, yeah, my 20s were basically in service of nothing of my own, basically. I was so burnt out from 14 till 22, basically, of doing my own thing and being in a van and spending every cent on my own records and all that shit. And then I got married, and it was like, I just decided that's when we moved to LA, and all I did was just play guitar as a sideman. I just did sessions, I went on tour, I did whatever I could. And it was a good move, like, for my family and to start a family and all that stuff. But yeah, next thing I knew, I was 32, and I hadn't made a record, in a million years. And for some reason, it was like, I don't know, the ball started to turn. I don't know why. I started to like get noticed again more as just a guitar player and less as like the artist I used to be, I guess. And that spurred me along to kind of get back into doing my own thing the way I am now. But yeah, I lost 10 years just doing sessions and sideman stuff that, not that I regret it because it made me a better musician and it helped my family, and be whatever, sustainable now the way we are. But yeah, I sometimes wonder about those 10 years.
Well, yeah, man. I mean, you're a very rare talent in your ability to kind of like you're really, really, really adept at switching those roles. I love your sideman stuff as much as your solo stuff, and I think it's all great. I mean, your stuff with Raphael alone, man. I mean, he's such a great musician. It says a lot that he would choose you to play with him. But I mean, I think you really up each other's game. That's a great collaboration.
Thanks, man. That was a gig that I was really like, I'd been out here a while already, and when I got that gig, it was like, oh, this is actually really enjoyable. Like it was the first one that was like, oh, I want to be doing this, like, and I'm staying on this gig as long as I can, because yeah, like you said, he's a really talented guy. He's a great guy too, and that band are probably my best friends still to this day. I mean, those are my brothers, and the best times I've ever spent on the road were in that band for sure. Like that's great music and great times. Oh,
Man,
all
I
right.
don't know how that Stone Rolling record wasn't the biggest thing of that year, man. That thing should have won like a few Grammys. I
Man,
have no idea how.
yeah, Stone Rolling is a weird one. I like Stone Rolling a lot. Don't get me wrong, but if he would have followed up the way I see it with something half as much like the way I see it, it could have still been like Stone Rolling, but just a little bit more still of the Motown thing. I think he would have continued, but that's not him, man. He just does what he wants to do and what he likes and what he hears, and But definitely the train was going with the Motowny stuff, and he kind of veered away from it slightly. But it is a great record.
Yeah, you're right about that in terms of like if he could have put out another one that used that sonic palette. I think what really hit me about that record was, I mean, he's always got a great songwriting technique to him, especially for R&B. I think he's just classic, man.
Yeah.
But the sound of that record was such a nice.
Yes.
It fit in such a nice pocket. It was original, but it was retro, and it's kind of like that thing you always see like a million bands trying to do that. And when I heard it, I was like, oh shit, he's done it.
Yeah. Well, it was funny at that time. There was a lot of that coming out. Obviously, there was this huge groundswell of like retro sounding stuff, Amy Winehouse and the Dap Kings and all that stuff. And yeah, I mean, he was the one who could do it without. He wasn't trying. Like he just could do it. You know what I mean? Like he knew how to do it, and it was very, very effortless for him. And I felt like he was the one writing like real songs that could have actually been hits in the 60s. You know what I mean? At least to me, that's how it seemed when I first heard it. And that's if you're wondering how I got the call, that's why I got the call. He was putting together a band to do that type of stuff, and out here, I guess I have somewhat of a reputation for knowing those kind of tunes and those kind of guitar styles relatively well. So he got my number from somebody, and that's why I got that phone call.
Wow. Well, I was so excited when I got to hear you guys together, man. I watched a bunch of YouTube videos of you guys performing. I never got to see the band live, but man, it
Yeah.
was. I just thought it was just such a killer project, and the live thing just took it to a whole nother, as it should, just took it to a whole nother place.
Yeah, it was a great band for sure. Really great band. All
Yeah.
right, so at this point, then you've released your solo records, you get married, and then you start to play with Greg. How did you even meet Greg? I have an interesting Greg story I'll tell you at the end. But how did you meet him the first time? And
If you're going to tell
get
me,
offered the
if you're going to
gig?
tell me a Greg, if you're going to tell me a Greg story, you got to tell me first if it's sober Greg or not.
It's not sober Greg. No, it's not sober Greg. Yeah,
Of course, it's not. It never is.
yeah.
I met sober Greg in. So I never knew the Greg before sober Greg in.
Right.
Let's see, what was it? So that was summer of 2008. It was August 2008. So my buddy Jay Collins had been playing saxophone in the band for many years. And Jay has been on the New York scene for like 30 years. He's still, actually, I have a gig with Jay tomorrow, of all things. It's funny.
Nice.
He's one of my best friends. And Jay's in Little Feat, too, which is also a hilarious coincidence. But, you know, Jay was telling me for years that Greg wanted to make a change in the guitar chair. And they had a great guitar player, but the guy was just not the right style. He was just more on the rock than the blues side. If you know exactly what I'm talking about, but
Yeah,
it's just wasn't the right fit for what Greg wanted. And basically, Jay was telling me, this is like my Waiting for Godot story. You know, when I was 27, I started playing with Jay, and Jay's like, "I'm going to get you an audition with Greg next month," and that went on for like 3 fucking years. So
Yeah, right.
I got to the point where I was just like, "This is never going to happen." So I got it out of my head, and I just got busy. So meanwhile, Jay and I are doing a bunch of other gigs. He got me a couple recording sessions with Lee Von Helm. You know, we were doing a bunch of cool shit together around here. And then one day I was living in Brooklyn at the time. Jay calls me and he goes, "All right, Scott, listen, the Allman Brothers are playing in Camden, New Jersey tonight. I need you to meet me on the turnpike. I'm going to drive you to the gig. I got us cleared to get in with 1 car and 2 passes, and I'm going to get you on stage to sit in." So it was literally the day of the show. So I had a gig that night that I canceled. Right, I subbed it out. I met up with Jay. Jay drove me to Camden, which is about 2 hours from New York City. And we get in the venue, and he takes me right to Greg Allman's dressing room. First time meeting everybody: Warren Haynes, Derek, O'Teal, Butch, J-Mo, the whole nine. So I'm meeting everybody. You know how those cats are. They're all super
Yes.
cool. Reminds me a lot of when I was a kid hanging out with the older blues and jazz guys. Like, everyone knows, everyone is no bullshit. It's just totally like, "Yo, what's up?" You know? So I get to Greg's dressing room, and obviously with Greg, there was always that certain sort of air of royalty about him when you first meet him. And when you meet someone as iconic as Greg Allman is in rock and roll, you have this moment where you can just melt into the floor and just be a total idiot about it. Or you can just be like, "Yo, what's up? Are you into Bobby Bland's guitar player, Wayne Bennett?" And that was the first thing we talked about.
Nice. I like that.
So, and Greg started it, because when I came in, Greg's like, "Hey, Scotty," and I'm like, "Greg, what's up, man? What are you listening to lately?" And he's like, "Oh man, I'm still on Bobby Bland." He's like, "You know all those Wayne Bennett licks on the Bobby Bland records?" And I said, "Greg, of course I know Wayne Bennett." I said, "You know, it's like Stormy Monday Blues." I'm like, that was one of your templates, right?" He's like, "Oh yeah, man." He's like, "I'm so glad you know Wayne." And he's like, "All right." And then next thing I know, I was on stage playing with him. And then after the gig, he came up to me and he's like, "You got the gig, man. I'll see you in Savannah in a couple weeks." And then basically I went to the tour manager guy and I was like, "What is this?" And he's like, you know, "Don't get your hopes up." Is Vid Sutherland, who has become honestly one of my gurus in the music business. But, you know, Vid, old school, you know, kind of beat up my ego after that a little bit. And then Greg had some health problems, which is, you know, how every Greg Allman story should start.
Right.
But God love him, man. But he had some health problems, and the fall didn't happen, and the fall got pushed to winter. And then in December, I finally went to Savannah. And then the first guy to pick me up was the same road manager, the man I love, Vid Sutherland. And he picked me up, and he gets me in the car. He goes, "I remember when Greg tried to change guitar players last year." said, "Oh yeah, Vid." I said, "How did that go?" He goes, "Guy was gone after the first day. I wouldn't unpack." So, so I get, so the next day I get to the audition. Well, I'm seeing it as the audition. Greg was like, "We're rehearsing, man. You're in the band." So I get in there, and I'm trying to think of it as an audition because I don't want to get too cocky because I'm getting all this heat from Vid. So I get in there, and the band was Steve Potts on drums from Booker T and the MGs, Jerry Jamot on bass, Bruce Katz from Ronnie Earl and the Broadcasters on piano. I mean, these are like my favorite musicians.
Yep.
Jay, Floyd Miles, you know Floyd.
Yeah. Well.
On percussion and vocals. So I get in there and I'm like, holy fucking shit. Like, this is an amazing band. I have got to do this. So, and then we got to the end of the first day and, you know, and Greg was just so cool and so kind and like, and very straightforward and honest. And like, it was just not bullshit. Like, I didn't feel like, I felt like family from day one. That's how he made me feel. And then Vid, of course, at the end of that was like, well, I guess you got the gig. So, then I unpacked my bag.
Nice. Man, that's such a great story. I can't imagine, like, you know, crossing that threshold of like, oh, I'm in here now, and then finally like just playing and relaxing. You know, it's got to be such a cool feeling to like be accepted.
Yeah, and the coolest part was like I remember the first song we played was just a shuffle, man, and it was like that groove, man, and just playing with those guys and Greg singing and getting to play off his voice. I mean, it was cloud nine, man. And then, you know, the first gig we played, there's 2,000 people, and you know, we're playing Stormy Monday for 10 minutes. It's like, does it get any better than this? It's like, how many times have I played this fucking song in an empty bar with fucking Sam Lay? And now it's like I'm actually able to do this and like feed my family potentially.
Yeah, that's an amazing feeling.
That was the best thing about Greg. You know, he was the real shit, man. That guy was just, he was beautiful, man. We had such a great time, man. I miss him every day. I think about him all the time.
So, I mean, I didn't really know him. I was lucky enough to cross paths with that whole family a lot because I'm from Florida, and Derek and I have known each other since we were little kids and played together so much. And, you know, the Allman Brothers are freaking like a religion in Florida. So it's like I was around it a lot. I'd see him a lot, and I played with Derek a lot. And so here's my little story. So around 95, maybe, Washburn was getting really deep with the Allman Brothers. They had made Greg this Melissa acoustic guitar with those slats on it, said Melissa on the neck. And they were like, any Allman Brothers connection with Washburn guitars was a thing. And so they made Derek a guitar, but they also, for some reason, sought me out, I guess because I was getting well known in Florida as a kid. And they made me a guitar. And then they were going to have this big show at the NAMM show, one of the nights, for all their new guitars and stuff. And they wanted me and Derek to play together as the young guys, you know what I mean? So they flew us out to L.A., and we go to this rehearsal studio. It was probably SIR. I probably didn't know what that was at the time. But, you know, now I've been there 8 million times. But whatever, we go to SIR, and I know Derek. We're friends, so we've known each other already for years. So we're hanging out. The bass player is Joe Perry's son, this guy named Adrian Perry, because they wanted, like, this whole kid thing going on. The drummer was Butch Trucks. So it was Butch Trucks, Adrian Perry, me, and Derek. And Greg's going to sing the whole gig. That's the plan, right? So I'm like, okay, this is going to be cool. This will actually be my first time playing with Greg. And Derek's like, man, Derek is not in the Allman Brothers yet. We're still before that, you know. It's still Warren and Dickie. And anyway, so Greg shows up to SIR. I have some pictures of it, but he was wearing these like remember those pants in the 90s? They were like drawstring, and they looked like zebra pants, like multicolored pants. He had those pants on and an Antone's tank top with Stevie Ray Vaughan on it. And I thought, oh, this is cool. Look at this. Look at this fucking Greg Allman. And he walks in, and I'm setting up my guitar. They had Randall amps because Washburn owned Randall at the time. So here I was with my Washburn plugging into these Randalls, and I had a fuzz face I used to use all the time back then, a regular one, a big, the circle one. And I was putting it down on the floor, plugging in my pedals, and Greg walked up on the stage, and he goes, I don't need any pedals for my rig. I'm just going to plug straight in and only play acoustic. And I'm like, No, sir, those are for me. I'm playing. My name's Josh. It's very nice to meet you. It's like, okay, that was it. That was my moment. So yeah, we played, and he wasn't sober, and but it was still a great experience. But I always tell everybody that story about like I was setting up the pedals for him.
That's amazing. Yeah, he probably thought, well, this they're setting me up, as he walked in.
Yeah.
That's
Yep.
crazy, man. I mean,
Exactly.
like I said, sober Greg was a different story. I mean, Greg, and to be fair, Greg was never actually technically sober. I mean, he was always smoking a pretty, let's say, a Willie Nelson dose of marijuana.
Right.
But
Right.
but the alcohol, I think, was really, really, it's a depressant, and I think it was really
Yeah.
hard for him. I'm also sure with Greg, it's like, I don't think he ever got over losing his brother, man. I mean, it's something we used to talk about
Sure.
all the time. And as that connected to music, it was really interesting to be in his band instead of his brother's band, as he used to say. Because, in his band, it was like, it was kind of like his playhouse. The brothers was like, it was almost like he saw it as a job to uphold, his brother's vision. But his band, he was so much more loose, and he would sing for 2 hours. It wasn't a
Right.
thing
Right.
where he was sharing the stage vocally with anybody, and it was his vision, and he was a different person when it was his band than any other situation I would see him in, because he was so comfortable with all of us.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. I remember seeing him once on his own gig, and he had maybe it was before you joined the band. In the interim, he did a tour with Robin playing guitar, and I remember seeing
Oh,
that.
dude, I have. Oh yeah, I have all those recordings of
Yeah.
that tour. That was the only Greg Allman Band stuff I studied besides the Dan Toller
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
It was Dan and Robin, and I told Robin, I was hanging out with him in Nashville last year, and I finally got to tell him, I said, man, I got to thank you for a few ideas that I took to play with Greg, because there were things he was doing on some of those tunes that no one had done before, especially tunes like Multicolored Lady. Some of the more ballad stuff. There was some pedal steel type stuff and some sus voicing shit that he was putting in there. It was just gorgeous, man. And Neil Larson was the band leader at that time. Because I ended up becoming the music director of the band for the last
Right.
5 years of the band. But Neil was the MD when Neil and I missed each other, unfortunately, because I fucking love Neil. But we weren't in the band at the same time. It was Bruce Katz and I at first, and then eventually
Right.
Pete Levin, but on keys. But Neil was the guy who brought in Robin.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Man, Dan Toller, that's a blast from the past. I used to play with him quite a bit in Florida growing up as a kid. Yeah.
That's a gift, man. I mean, that guy is one of the greatest ever.
Yeah. Yeah. Him and his brother. It was always cool. We'd play, especially in Sarasota. It was always Sarasota with all the Allman Brothers stuff and connections. Always Sarasota. Floyd Miles too. Yeah, all Sarasota.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, dude. Let's get into my 10 questions here, because we're started to talk about some of the things already, so I don't want to give away the answers.
All right.
All right. Number one, when you started learning and playing, you already talked about the Jimmy Reed, but I'm always curious, what's the first thing that when you got it under your fingers, there was like that moment of pride of like, I can't believe I pulled this off, and it sets that hook, like, oh, no going back. This is it. Like, this is what I'm doing for the rest of my life.
Well, the Jimmy Reed is definitely the big bang for me.
Yeah.
After that, it's probably like, like, I don't know, like. Like once I got that,
Nice.
Oh Carol. Oh Carol was probably number two, and I'm sure I didn't know what the fuck I was playing when I learned it.
Wow. Man, that Oh Carol is killer, of course, an amazing one. Man, that feeling when like you've listened to something so many times and then it finally comes out of your hands is like There's nothing
Yeah.
like it. You know, it's just you can't go backwards. It's like, man, this now you play guitar. That's it. It's like, yeah, it's such a special thing.
That's right.
Yeah. Ugh. Dude, what's the first solo that you ever cared enough to learn note for note? Like you had to learn it?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. Well, I mean, I don't know if that's a solo. I mean, it was a couple of the Chuck Berry things, but it wasn't the whole thing. So let me think. Clapton Crossroads, the live version with Cream.
Yeah. Yeah. You're not the first person to say that. And I mean, it's such an iconic solo. Now, can you remember it by heart now for the rest of your life? I'm not asking you to play it. I'm just saying, like, I remember.
Oh, I
like,
can play it.
yeah. 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 You'll never forget
Yeah.
those things, those solos, like the ones you take the time to learn that because they just blow your mind. It's like, yeah, any Stevie thing, like I'll remember every solo note for note for the rest of my life, and I can go 5, 10 years between playing it, and it'll still come out like nothing, you know.
Well, you mentioned In Step. To me, that's Stevie Ray Vaughan's Mona Lisa for the guitar solos. I mean, he put a lot of work. He was sober, and he put a lot of work into that record. And
Yeah.
I saw him on that tour. I was
Oh,
10,
wow.
11 years old, and I fucking saw it. Jeff Beck came out first. He played. I turned to my dad. I said, "It doesn't get any better than that. We should just leave. Stevie Ray Vaughan's going to embarrass himself." My dad's like, "We're waiting. We're going to watch Stevie Ray Vaughan." Stevie Ray Vaughan came out. He got the end of the first song, and I turned to my dad and I said, "That's what I want to do with my life." And as much as I love and adore Jeff Beck to this day, and I think he's a fucking wizard, as a kid, the energy, the shamanistic energy coming off Stevie was something I will never forget. And I've experienced it many times since. I saw Ray Charles live, Al Green, Elvin Jones. There's certain people I've seen who had that, but he had that metaphysical, shamanistic energy about him, especially when he hit the sobriety,
Yeah. Man, I tell people that all the time about him. As much as the playing and the music is a huge influence on me, the biggest thing about finding him and first seeing it, for me it was on video, was the energy. It was just oh my God, it looks almost like he has to do this or he would die. And that's the way I want to feel. Like I have to do that. And that was always what made the biggest impression on me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, man. Well, that's cool you got to see him. I wish I could have. I turned down the chance. I didn't really know what I was turning down, but on that Jeff Beck tour, my dad, I think, asked if I wanted to go. And I was 9 years old, so I think I just didn't know what I was answering yet. Who knows?
Sounds like we were both afraid of the truth.
Probably.
I stayed just by hair. I wanted to leave. I was already there. But I tell you what, man, I'll never forget that feeling. I'll never forget it. I can still feel, even though I was way in the back, I can still feel the sound coming at me. It was something else, man.
That's awesome, man. Ugh. All right, number 3. What's the first thing you play every time you pick up a guitar? Do your hands just go somewhere?
The blues.
Yeah? Anything in specific, though?
No, the blues is all that matters, man. As long as it's like to me it's like as soon as I pick up a guitar, what I like about the guitar is like the first position, That's how I make sure a guitar is in tune. But for me, it's got to be a seventh. It's got to start with a seventh, and then I could go anywhere from there. But to me, that whether it's fucking Chuck Berry or Pink Floyd, if it doesn't have blues, I don't even want to hear it.
Okay, so if you're in a music store and you want to check out a guitar, is that also the first thing you play to like check its tuning, check and see how it feels? Yeah. I'm always curious what guys play to get a feeling for a guitar and see if they like it. And sometimes you play different things to see if this guitar can even handle this or will do that, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Well, I know you've done this a bunch, but like Carter Vintage, I've done a couple sessions for them. The thing where you're sitting there and they're like, "Oh yeah, this is worth $60,000," and then they give you another one and you play them. And you're 100% right about that. Everyone they hand me, I'll play something different. Sometimes I might end up playing some Lightning Hopkins finger picking shit, and then sometimes I might end up playing rhythm changes. I mean, I don't really have any rules about style per se, and you're right, certain guitars and setups and string height, gauge, tension, amp, there's a lot of factors that can take you in different directions, if you're open to it.
Oh yeah, even stupid visual cues. I mean, you can't help but if someone hands me a frickin' L5, even before I hear it, maybe it has terrible pickups that aren't really that dark. Still, the first thing I'm going to play is going to be some Wes Montgomery type thing or whatever. It's where my mind goes. If someone hands me a Strat, before I even turn it in, I'm thinking about Stevie Ray Vaughan and Jimi Hendrix and Curtis Mayfield and whatever. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's mental too. It's not even just sometimes the guitar.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, cool. All right. Well, that's good answers. Number 4. What key, style, song, groove, whatever, do you hear like when you're just like doing nothing? When you're driving the car, when you're cooking eggs, whatever. Do you have like a narration? I hear a shuffle all the time. I hear an improv, like kind of Charlie Parker-ish, like a B-flat swinging improv. That's just what I hear 24 hours a day. You have something like that?
Thank God, no. I have like, I'm pretty much in the off position or in the intake position until a song comes to me. And that my antenna, my daily antenna is tuned to songwriting and riffs and chord progressions and lyrical ideas. The thing of improvising, I take that sort of by osmosis. So pretty much I always have music on, and I would say these days especially 99% of it is not what I play. So it's a lot of Indian classical music, classical piano music, world music, I guess you would call it. So all kinds of reggae, dub reggae. I love all that, like African blues shit, like Ali Farka Touré and like those fucking crazy, amazing Bedouin guitar player shit. Like that's like mainly what I listen to when I put music on. And then if I want to hear what I try to do, I'll usually just throw on WWOZ, especially as an advertisement. 8 o'clock Monday through Friday is like, it's like that radio show, when I was a teenager going down south from the Midwest, and you'd find that fucking radio station and every song is like, yes, what is this?
Yeah.
So that's the other thing I listen to. But otherwise, no, I don't really have an improvisation network going in my head. But if I did, it would probably be Johnny Guitar Watson playing a solo over and over again.
Well, okay, so that addendum to that question, when you're in the car and you're listening to the radio, and something comes on you don't know, right? Like some piece of music just comes on you've never heard before. What are you hearing in there? I've been lately trying to kind of take stock of what's the first thing I hear whenever I listen to any music, whether it be a new melody on top or a counterpoint or syncopated, just like a rhythmic thing over the top, or maybe I am hearing an improvisation. Do you ever notice, like, what's the first thing you kind of start hearing?
Yeah, I don't know if in terms of like what I would add to it.
I don't even know if it's what you would add to it. It's just, I've been trying to like key myself into like, where does my brain go? What am I really like thinking, hearing when I'm listening to something I've never heard before? It's been an interesting like exercise because it's different on every piece of music. My brain just goes right to something, and starts making something happen over the top of some piece of music I've never heard before. And I'm curious, like
it's a great. I mean, that's a great exercise. I'm going to have to do that and get back to you. I maybe not haven't tried to tune in on that. I suppose I have that brain too. That, and you know all about this too very well. Is like that sort of producer, studio musician brain that I have to use all the time. Like I do tracks for people all the time. Yeah. So maybe I'm just maybe I've just been too far down the rabbit hole with segmenting my brain. But that's a great exercise, like just to understand. Maybe I would think of that like in terms of arranging, what grabs me first, the bass line, the guitar part, the vocal, the lyric. I don't know. Maybe that's the way I hear it. That's possible. But I'd have to think about that and get back to you.
I sometimes think that same way too. And sometimes I think of it purely as like a session guitar player too. Like, and it's, again, I'm not doing it on purpose, but yeah, sometimes I'll hear music, and I'll think of it the same way I hear it when I'm setting up at a studio getting ready to play on it. And it's like, what should I play on this? You know, like what can I add to this that's going to make it right, or add something? And yeah, it's weird. You know, instead of like thinking just about what I would want to play or whatever, I've been trying to just take note of what am I really hearing the second a piece of music comes on. What's just the unfiltered thought, you know? And it's been interesting kind of taking note of that.
Oh yeah, man, that'll definitely help, zero in on, playing what you hear as opposed to playing until you play what you hear. You know what I mean?
And that's an obsession for me. Like, I'm always trying to remove as much filter as possible so that like what I'm hearing is just coming out without thinking, you know what I mean? And as much as I can strengthen that bond, it's an obsession for me.
That's great, man.
Yeah. Interesting. All right. Well, cool. Number 5. When did you feel like you maybe started to find your own voice on the instrument? Was there a moment when you wrote something or even just played something and it clicked, or maybe someone even from the outside told you, hey, man, that thing you're doing there or that song I really like that. Maybe you should go further down that path. Do you remember any moments like that?
Man, I'll let you know when I find it. I'm still looking, bro. I haven't gotten there. I mean, it's a really tricky thing, especially these days, because you gotta contextualize what we're dealing with as musicians, where we're living, and I don't mean this to be in a dark way. I just want it to be sort of let's deal with the reality. We're not living in the zeitgeist anymore, right? So we're post-Renaissance is what we are. So how do we? And this is one of the things that by the way, I really, and this is why, the reason I'm on your show is because I watch your stuff, and I admire how you figured out how to sort of protect tradition and push the boundaries, but then also, you go into the guitar world, but it's still music, so it's like, and I feel like our age has a lot to do, and the similarities with our upbringing has a lot to do with the fact that, I'm doing the same thing. And we're the lucky ones. We're the survivors. When you think about other people in our age group who aren't diversified like this, I mean, they're driving Ubers now, pretty much.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's a tragic part of this. But all this shit, it happened to classical music. It happened to jazz. What we're participating with True Fire in, which I think they're just phenomenal company, and they've been so supportive of both of us, especially during this. And I love them, and I love the way they do the content. I think it's the best in the business. But at some point, we're going to have to completely institutionalize, playing rock and roll, blues, soul, everything that's not jazz and classical in the way that Wynton Marsalis has. And that's kind of what we're dealing with. So in terms of having an original voice, to get back to your question, like, how original is Wynton Marsalis's voice or Yo-Yo Ma's voice? I mean, that's kind of where we're at this point. So I try, to answer your question, I try to refine the teachings I continue to get. And I've been in this weird position where I keep ending up in my favorite bands of all time. So with Little Feat now, I'm the new singer, guitar player, songwriter for Little Feat. And I'm talking to Bill Payne every day, and we're writing songs, and I'm cutting tracks for them now. And we would have already done a summer tour by the time I'm talking to you now and going on our next one. But those guys are playing better than ever, and they're in their 70s, and they're writing incredible shit. And we just got Tony Leone on drums, who's just, one of my best friends and just an unbelievable musician. And the whole thing is just elevating so much. And these guys are my dad's age. But the thing is I'm, again, like I was with Greg, writing all those tunes with Greg and leading his band with him. With Bill, it instantly became a partnership, and it just shows me that I'm always going to be tethered to the Renaissance. I'm always going to be carrying Van Gogh's easel into the sunflower field for him. You know,
That's funny.
I don't think I'm ever going to be Van Gogh, you know, but I can learn whatever I can by standing next to him and doing some pieces with him and trying to understand how the paints mix. And I look at it as like oil painting is not what it used to be, but if you were a guy who did that with Van Gogh, you'd be one of the experts on oil painting. And oil painting wouldn't be changing the world the way Sergeant Pepper did anymore, but it would be doing something for humanity, the way Yo-Yo Ma and Wynton Marsalis do. And I think that's the best we can hope for. I don't think originality is going to happen for us, but that's just, you know, that's just my revelations from the last few years.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, it's weird, you know, the personal voice thing. For me, I find I apply it to myself almost exclusively in my improvisation. I'm not as concerned about writing songs that are only like my own songs that don't have any like nod to other styles or songs that I've heard before. I don't worry about those type of concerns as much. It's more about the improv. I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to make all the boats rise, man. I mean, when we, like I was saying before, to survive, we're so diversified.
Yeah,
And
we've had to
that
be.
just, it exactly. And you know who told me I was going to have to do that when I was 21 was Ahmet Ertegun. He told me, he said, I will give you, I will paraphrase what he said to me in our first hour-long meeting in his office. He said to me, he said, Scott, these idiots downstairs who are running Atlantic Records, all they care about is getting a bonus and buying another house. They don't know anything about being a tastemaker or what it is to be a tastemaker. And he said, if you want to survive and make your art, he said, I can hook you up with all these different people, and I guarantee you that nobody is going to do the right thing about you, for you, or for your type of artistry but you. So you're going to have to write, sing, play better than everybody else if you can, or as good as you can, and you're going to have to be a sideman, you're going to have to co-write for people, you're going to have to go on the road with other people, and you're going to have to do your own thing. Because he said, no one downstairs, at that time we were in the Time Warner building, the old one, you know, downstairs in the Atlantic Records offices, is going to take a chance on you because they need a hit now so they can get a bonus.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's it's generational, and that's sad. It's like, you know, Larry Carlton didn't like decide to be Larry Carlton the artist. It was like, you know, he just became Larry Carlton the artist because of what he was already doing. And it was like, you know, Quincy Jones, you know, it'd be a realistic, a completely unrealistic goal now to want to be like the next Quincy Jones. It's not even possible. You know what I mean? Like, but I have many friends who was like, they thought that's what they'd do with their life. They'd be Larry Carlton or Mike Landau or they'd be a producer like Quincy Jones or whatever, or they'd get themselves in a band and have magic happen. So they'd be Neil Schon and all of a sudden write all these tunes and be set for the rest of their life, like the guitar player in Journey or whatever. And dude, those things are just don't exist. It's literally they don't exist.
Well, that just goes back to my original point about this Jazz at Lincoln Center lifestyle. I mean, you remember when Wynton, I mean, we were really young, but when Wynton really got wind in his sails with Jazz at Lincoln Center, it was all about the fact that he wanted to have a big band and no one wanted to pay for it.
Yep.
So they literally had to institutionalize big bands to keep them alive. And there are people out there doing great shit. I mean, look at To Pimp a Butterfly. I mean, look at that record and those Thundercat, those musicians who participated in that. And that's a huge commercial, critical success. The Childish Gambino record, that last record of his was a phenomenal fucking record. You know, there's a bunch of great shit being made that's making money. I'm just talking about, you know, the stuff that we grew up playing, especially like the rock and roll, the real rock and roll shit, which is basically all blues based. So all the really blues based music with old tube guitars, amplifiers, and, you know, PAF pickups and B3 organs and drums and bass, you know, approaching music that way, it exists, but you're not going to change music with it anymore. You know,
Nope.
it's a thing like Yo-Yo Ma playing Bach cello suites. And I guarantee you, if Yo-Yo Ma wrote an album of new original music, it would not sell the way him doing a Bach cello suite show would. And I guarantee you, every year, he's got to teach, he's got to play the cello suites, and then he can do his shit. It's the same thing for us now.
Yep, absolutely. 100%. Ugh. All right, number 6. What do you consider your biggest weakness on the guitar?
Oh my God! How much longer do we have? Oh my God! Wow.
Like, what's kryptonite for you?
Anything fast. I can't play anything that's fast. Like, especially being, I've been in New York for, oh my God, how many years have I been here? Almost 23 years. So, like, New York is all about the jazz, right? It's about jazz and hip hop. That's New York. If you had to sum it up, punk rock it used to be about, it's not about anymore, but it's really jazz and hip hop at this point, and particularly jazz. And that fast bebop shit, anything that's fast with the spangalang, I can't play it. Like, I can't hear it. Now, if it's any of the older, 50s, 60s jazz, I'm down with all that. But like when Bird got really fast in the 50s and shit, I can't hear, or 40s, I can't hear that shit. I can't play anything fast.
Interesting. Because, you play fast enough.
Well, I can play fast over a certain tempo, but when the beats per minute of the band gets to a certain point,
yeah,
I just can't hear it anymore. And I have friends, and I say this because I have friends like my friend Brian Sharrard, who's just unbelievable fucking organ player, and one of my best friends for 22 years since I moved to New York. And Brian, he can play these tempos that are just, I can't even hear the fucking quarter or the eighth or even the 16th note. And the shit he plays is just gorgeous. I've heard Kurt Rosenwinkel do shit like that. I've heard a lot of musicians who can do, Brad Meldau, I've heard do shit. He doesn't do it as much anymore, but years ago, those guys, man, when I hear that, I'm just like, how are they making this feel good? I just don't know how to make fast stuff feel good.
Interesting. All right. Fair enough. Okay, number 7. Who's a huge influence on your guitar playing that people would be surprised to hear?
Miles Davis. I don't know if that would be surprising or not, but he's my favorite instrumentalist of all time. I'd say for me, my greatest inspirations overall, it's a tie between Miles and Hendrix. But Miles for that voice. As an instrumentalist, I just don't think there's. Besides Louis Armstrong, I don't think there's anybody who has a fingerprint like that. There's like Louis, B.B. King, Miles. That's the ultimate goal for all of us. If you want to talk about getting your own sound,
yes.
That's the thing where, you know what I mean? Like, Miles. Every time I put on Miles Davis and I hear him play one fucking note, I just feel like it's all I want to hear for the rest of my life. There's so much truth in every move. Yeah. So that's my greatest improvisation inspiration. But I've got, like I've got many, many, many influences. I could go all day, but that's the one I always come back to,
Well, you could do worse.
Yeah.
All right, number 8. And everybody's answer to this has been different. Would you rather have a great guitar and a shitty amp, or vice versa? A great amp and a shitty guitar on a gig situation?
100,000% a great guitar and a shitty amp.
So we're opposite on this, but tell me why.
The PV Bandit.
Yeah, I played PV Bandits all through high school. I hate them.
No, but I was just gonna say, like, I had it. This is a cool story on that. All the motherfuckers, the best guitar players in Milwaukee when I was a kid, Stokes being the best of all of them. Stokes was our local hero. He just passed away. May he rest in peace last year. Mm-hmm. But man, Stokes was my mentor. I played drums in his band. I played guitar in his band. I would fucking carry this guy's equipment anywhere. All he ever played was a PV Bandit with 115 straight into it, but he had a fucking 1960 335. All original. Mm. And man, that I can hear that tone right now in my head, and it's just fucking perfect. So that's the only reason I say that, is because that has inspired me over the years, that when I get a bad amp, at least I know if I have, because for me personally, it's like I use a lot of pedals to control stage volume or sometimes do effects, but I've always been more, especially in the studio, straight into the amp. And, you know, I really feel that a guitar, electric guitar, is all about having a good setup and great fucking pickups. And I feel like if I have great pickups and a good setup, I can make something work, as long as there's enough headroom for the style of music. Now, see, that's where that question gets funny, right? Because the headroom thing is major. Like, if you're talking about me playing a 5-watt champ with a 7-8-piece rock band, of course, that's a major fucking problem, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you can crank it through the monitor, but then you got to deal with that acid trip. So,
so you'd rather have your 335 and a JC 120 than like whatever guitar and a great super reverb or something?
Yes, and that's because I was just in Holland and I got stuck with a goddamn 120. I did.
Okay.
And I had this guitar, and I had a couple pedals with me, and it took an hour, but I made it work.
Well, there you go. There you go. See, for me, I'm always much more comfortable with whatever guitar, but an amp that even sounds like approximately like what I'm used to and has, again, the headroom is a very big part of it. I know that there'll be a better show for the audience with whatever guitar and my pedals and my amp, as opposed to the other way around. If I take this guitar and then have to play the gig with a JC 120, I'll make it happen, sure, but I know it won't be as good a show as vice versa.
I mean, my kryptonite is a Roland jazz chorus. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, unless you're going to play, like, you know, a Fela Kuti gig, you know, I have no idea what that amp is supposed to be used for.
I've never, I'm in high school. This friend of mine.
Well, yeah, it says jazz on it.
Yeah, it says jazz on it, yeah. And so they had one at the school, and so my friend liked it for some reason. And it came time for him to buy an amp for his first gigging band, which was, by the way, like a hard rock band. He bought a JC 120, and he was playing with all these Digitech pedals through it, and he couldn't understand why he couldn't get it to sound great. And I'm like, dude, it's the amp. It's not any of your guitars or your. It's like, take any other amp and you'll be fine. I was lucky. Someone steered me when I needed my first gigging amp, my step up from practice amp to an actual amp. Someone steered me in the music store to buying a used Silverface Pro Reverb. And it was the first real amp I ever got. And probably it could be still the only amp I ever owned if I would have been fine. You know what I mean? It was just a real working amp.
Those are great amps. They're a dark horse, but they're one of the great ones.
Yeah, and it served me well for a long time. Yeah, 40 watts has always been that special little area. It's like you got to have that. Yeah.
Well, front of house is always going to hate us either way.
Either way,
go for 100.
Either way. Yeah. Oh man! All right, number 9. What keeps you motivated to keep improving and pushing ahead as a guitar player? Like, what keeps you working on new shit? Is it just like the writing and that stuff that informs your progression as a guitar player, or do you still work on just guitar stuff? What keeps you going?
Well, a lot of it has to do with, I mean, as far as my solo stuff goes, my solo efforts, and I mean, my 5th one came out a couple years ago, Saving Grace. I have the 6th one is in the can. I was going to release it in the spring, and obviously we know what happened there.
Yeah, there's no reason to release anything right now.
Oh no, of course not. I actually just got my first major booking agent deal in March too, and everybody got laid off at the company. So there you go. Yeah. But basically, so what I've been doing with my own stuff is, you know, my original music is just wide open. So I don't answer to anybody. All my shit is self-released. I don't do it based on anything as far as genre. It would have to be called rock, but it moves, or Americana, but it moves in a lot of different directions. And guitar-wise, you know, I'm constantly trying to collaborate, and that's one of my bucket list things is for us to play together, because you know, I think we could do some really fun shit. But I love playing with guitar players, man. Like great guitar players, and it teaches me so much. And the last experience I was lucky to have is one of my favorites of all time is this guy who lives up here in Woodstock, Dan Littleton, and he has a band that does this actually for children's music. It's the best fucking children's music out there with his wife Elizabeth, but and they've been very successful with it. But he's just an amazing fucking guitar player. And when I say that, I mean he's kind of like a combination of like it's almost like Sonny Sharrock, Neil Young, kind of. I mean, this guy's all pure instinct and just beautiful fucking ideas. And that whole thing we were talking about only playing what you hear, I have never heard Dan Littleton play anything that shouldn't be there. He's so inspiring, man. Like, I can't tell you, like, people don't know it. I mean, it's a thing where I know him through Amy Helm, you know, Levon's daughter, and Amy's just an incredible artist, and he plays on her records, so you can hear him on those. But, you know, Dan, the first time I heard him play, you know, he was opening for me or something at Levon's place, and I lost my mind. I was like, you have to play with my band. Like, you need to play with us. I can't go on and not have you come back and play again. And Derek Trucks had the same reaction with him. I mean, when Amy Helm opened for Derek and Susan, if you ask next time you see Derek, ask him why he got that, his first pedal of his career, that delay pedal. That's because of Dan, because Dan had an old Echoplex. And he's a big fan, so he has fans. But anyway, I got Dan to play on my new record, and we did a tune where we overdubbed on a track, but we set up in a room and we traded 4s and 8s. And man, it's like I'm still on a cloud from that. Like, I learned so much watching him, the way his hands move and stuff. And then the other thing is Little Feat. Like, the first time I ever played slide was I tuned a Strat up to open A and tried to sound like Lil George, and now I'm back down that rabbit hole. So I've been doing that for the last year.
Yeah.
You know,
well, and that, I mean, even just learning the catalog, it keeps you motivated and pushing forward for sure.
Well, I've been spending a lot of time on that, and I've been writing for Little Feat too, which has been another interesting exercise because as they are probably my favorite rock band of all time is Little Feat, always has been, and Will George specifically to what I do. And for me, it's been interesting to actually write songs for the band in the style of the band. That's been kind of my main exercise these days.
It's a tough, like, charge, you know what I mean, to take that on. Like, okay, I'm going to write for this band that I really care about. And I have to write, like, in their style without being, like, you know, too on the nose and, like, tributing them in their own band. It's got to be an interesting thing, you know?
Well, I tell you, man, I thank every day for my time with Greg Allman, because writing songs with him and being in his band and that record Southern Blood that we managed to eke out, you know, that experience informs every step I'm taking with Little Feat. You know, It's like, just try. And then also like Levon Helm, who, you know, I didn't get to play with him a lot, but I got to do a few sessions with him, and I used to open for him at the Ramble. I subbed in the band. A couple times I played his last show with him at the Barn in the band, subbing for Larry Campbell. And watching what those guys did and being part of what those guys did for his career with Dirt Farmer and Electric Dirt, those were great lessons for me to have for this experience with Little Feat, because just watching, you know, how Larry Campbell, Jimmy Vivino, and Levon did it, and then watching Warren and Greg, and then me coming into that spot with Greg and his band. So I feel like if anyone should have this job, it's me. I've got that on my side at least.
Wow.
You know, I feel like I'm ready for the challenge. You know?
Yeah. You've got the unique work experience necessary to pull it off.
It's a bizarre resume, but yes, it works out.
All right, number 10. What's your 5-year plan, man? Where do you want to be? Is there something you really are trying to achieve that's like you won't rest until you've hit that mark?
Well, the 5-year plan for me is to get Little Feat headlining Jones Beach within the next 2 or 3 years. That's my plan.
That's a good one.
My only, and because I already did it once with Greg Allman, I'm going to try to get lucky a second time. Because when I joined up with Greg, that band, the Greg Allman band, we were on the Casino Road to Doom. You know,
right.
We were playing for 400 or 500 people a night. Greg was singing the best of his life. And I said to him, man, we got to do exactly what's in your head. And it took us a few years, but we finally figured it out. We got the right band. We got the right songs. We got the right show. We got the right crew. We had the right people, the right agent. And, you know, the last summer of that band on the road, we played 7 festivals where the Greg Allman Band was the headliner. And most of them were sold out to several thousand people. And if he had lived another year or two, we would have gone right into that Allman Brothers spot. That's where the band was going. So, I mean, that's what I really want to see with Little Feat. As far as for my solo band, I mean, I remember having this conversation with you on the phone. I just have all these like random promoters who find me and clubs who find me, and we just end up playing like 60, 70 gigs a year. I don't know how it happens. I don't, you know, as I said, I was transitioning to having a big agent. So that's still something that may happen, and I hope it does, and we'll see how my solo career progresses around that. But, you know, my main focus is really, I'm in this band. You know, I've been welcomed into the band as a band member and as a singer and songwriter. So my main goal in the next few years is to really relaunch this band that I love so much and I'm so excited about. And I just want to get a few years in with that band and I'll keep the solo thing going and see what happens. But, you know, as you know, with the solo thing, it's like touring, it's like I was saying to you earlier in the conversation, it's almost better if I just stay in the Northeast and don't go through the hassle of losing the money, you know?
Yeah, that's a major frustration because it's like, I know there's people who care and want to see what I do, and I can't get there without literally putting myself in, not harm's way, but like distress slightly, you know? So that's all.
Well, it's got a price tag. It's, you know, a career, like to get a solo career going in the music business, it has a price tag first, and then it has to have a story. So
yep.
A lot of times, you know, it helps a lot to be the son of somebody, whether they be a famous musician or actor or whatever it may be. And then if you are, you've probably got the money to stick it out. And,
yep.
You know, even if you're only half as talented as whoever your mom or dad is, it's good enough for everybody to keep buying tickets for some reason. And
yep.
We're back at Exhibit A, like I was saying to you before. People want to hear Beethoven's Fifth. So if your name is Johnny Beethoven,
yeah.
They're going to take their girlfriend to the show, right? I mean, it's like, am I going to go see this guy who's writing the most influential classical music around right now? Or am I going to go see, hey, it's Johnny Beethoven. Come on, honey, we'll buy tickets.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Well, you know. I don't know where we go after that because you're right. Dude, thank you for doing this. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day. That's the end of the 10 questions.
I had so much fun. Much fun. You're great at this, man. You're like the Mark Maron of guitar.
Well, thanks, dude. And for members, we're going to do our little turn 2 video, and we'll be right back. But if you're not a member, you should become one. So hit join or subscribe. There will be links to all things Scott Sharrard down in the bottom of this video. So make sure you buy his records, buy his True Fire, and support a real artist. But, dude, thanks for taking the time out of your day to do this. It's greatly appreciated.
Man, it was a pleasure. My only regret is that we weren't actually able to play again. But I know it's going to happen. I can feel it.
It will. All right, we'll be right back.
All right, bro. Thanks for having me.